This is CBC Here and Now.
Quiet on the weather front, but lots of action on the sea.
We believe that Mr. Brake was a threat to cause death or serious bodily harm.
Police say this man was intent on killing politicians.
Tonight, we have details about the man arrested in Deer Lake with 3 dozen knives.
I think this idea of immigrants and refugees coming to the province and kind of detracting from its own cultural identity is just not true.
And in our second half hour,
what would it take to make this province a more attractive place for immigrants? 3 people with first-hand experience weigh in.
Welcome to Here and Now. I'm Carolyn Stokes.
And I'm Peter Cowan. Tonight we have details on the man charged after a frightening incident yesterday in Deer Lake. 66-year-old George Brake has been charged with uttering threats to cause death, possession of dangerous weapons, and flight from police. Police say officers stopped Brake outside of the local PC candidate's law office. He had 36 knives and planned on killing someone. Here Now's Mark Quinn has the latest on the arrest and Brake's background.
This is the man police say wanted to stop the provincial election. George Brake was captured by police after a chase. They found 36 knives in a box next to him.
We believe that Mr. Brake was a threat to cause death or serious bodily harm.
Brake's Facebook page paints a picture of an angry man. Many posts have been taken down by the app, but others suggest Brake supported former U.S. President Donald Trump and doesn't believe that the pandemic or the vaccine to prevent it are real. Police were called by a concerned resident who said Brake was talking about weapons and heading to Deer Lake to stop the ongoing provincial election. He was stopped by police about 30 minutes later in Deer Lake, near the office of PC Humber-Grossmorn candidate Jim Gowdy. Police say Brake made an alarming statement.
At that time, Mr. Brake threatened to execute local politicians.
Brake had these knives in his pickup with him. Police say one was lodged next to the driver's seat. Liberal leader Andrew Furey says it's a heavy blow to him and his family, one that made him question his decision to enter politics.
I'm not going to lie to you, it hits close to home. It makes you question, if you're doing the right thing. I do believe that I am doing the right thing. I do believe that others are doing the right thing. But it is very troubling.
Furey has continued to campaign today. He's hundreds of kilometers north of Deer Lake and still weeks away from the February 13th provincial election day.
My wife is with me on the Great Northern Peninsula today, and to have to tell our children about this because it was on the news, frankly, over FaceTime, and it's tough.
The Progressive Conservative Party's leader believes candidates are now safe to continue campaigning.
This seems to be an isolated incident aimed at candidates in general and the election process.
Police say 66-year-old George Brake is due back in court tomorrow afternoon in Corner Brook at 1:30 in the afternoon. They say now that Mr. Brake is in custody, they don't believe there's a threat to politicians. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
A quiet weather day today, not a whole lot going on, some cloudy periods as well as some sunshine, but temperatures today quite nice, about -1 in St. John's today as you head towards the west coast, hovering or flirting just above the 0-degree mark, and then we've got those temperatures again into the minus double digits. Yesterday mentioned the wave action for parts of the northeast coast. Take a look at this, just step out of the frame here. Mark Gray captured this at Cape Bonavista earlier today. Some of those waves will continue as we head through the overnight tonight and into tomorrow, and that's because we've got an area of low pressure just offshore, and that's what's prompting all those waves. This one sticks around for a little while. It's moved far offshore, but it's going to move closer to us as we head through the next 24 to 36 hours. It'll bring the potential for some flurries, but overall, not a whole lot happening. I'll have all those details coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, Newfoundland and Labrador Housing is apologizing to residents of Buckmaster Circle in St. John's after 11 households spent a week without proper heat and hot water. The Housing Corporation says it should have followed normal protocols and arranged for alternative accommodations for residents, like a hotel, during the furnace repairs. Instead, each household received 3 space heaters. Residents told Here and Now last night they're concerned those extra heaters will bump up this month's electricity bills. The corporation says it will reimburse tenants for any extra costs. The furnace was fixed about an hour after residents took their concerns to CBC. Housing says the part needed to fix the furnace was out of province and shipping was delayed due to weather. Now, in a letter, CEO Julia Mullally tells the residents, again, on behalf of the corporation, I extend my sincere apologies and please be assured that we're committed to improve client services.
There are 2 new cases of COVID to tell you about today. Both are men in the eastern region. One is tied to international travel. The other is still under investigation. The province is now doing more to check up on people coming in from outside of Newfoundland and Labrador. People under isolation are getting 3 phone calls to make sure they're following the rules. Now, this only started a month ago once the province started using an electronic registration system when people arrive.
Over the past month, we have stepped up our follow-up with travellers to ensure that they are aware of and complying with self-isolation requirements. All individuals must declare their self-isolation plan and contact information before they are permitted entry into the province. Public health officials make contact with all travellers in self-isolation. If there is no response after several attempts by phone and email, law enforcement will be contacted.
The province hasn't provided numbers about just how often law enforcement has had to be involved. Now, the calls are being made by staff at Statistics Canada. Earlier this week, police charged a man with violating his isolation after he was stopped and accused of drinking and driving.
Well, it is concerning to hear that someone is not adhering to self-isolation protocols, but you know, I feel like the system, once it was discovered, the system worked.
Hello, my name is Laura Beltonba, and I'm a local resident of St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. And for this year's election, what I'd really like to see the politicians focus on is the fact that we don't live in a silo in Newfoundland, and the global politics about race and racism and discrimination and multiculturalism are something that do affect us here in the province. As we saw last year with the murder of George Floyd, racial politics is something that's always existed, but it's become more of a forefront issue, and Newfoundland doesn't exist in a silo. So what's happening down in the States is definitely, there's a level of that same sentiment here within the province, though we might be a little bit more politically correct, and it might live a little bit more below the surface. It is something that people have faced racism and discrimination. It's time to tackle it head on. I think it's bringing people to the table, kind of getting people from different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds and racial backgrounds to be able to sit at that table and discuss with them and bring the issues they're currently facing in their communities to the politicians, because a lot of people don't feel like they can approach their politicians currently just because they don't feel like their voices are loud enough, they don't feel represented within the political climate. And so it's for the politicians to kind of take a seat and invite people to the table so they can feel like there's representation for them within the community.
We'll be sharing more of those messages leading up to the election to find out what matters most to you. Tonight, we'll also hear from the group Faces of Fertility. They believe access to infertility treatments should be an election issue. We'll also speak with people who have first-hand experience with immigration in this province, what works and what doesn't. That's ahead in about 15 minutes. So now, turning back to the campaign trail, the Liberals spent part of the day on the Great Northern Peninsula seeking support for St. Barb Lansom Meadows candidate Krista Lynn Howell. With Christopher Mitchellmore choosing not to run again, the seat is up for grabs. Andrew Fury has an idea how to grow our population, get more Newfoundlanders and Labradorians living away to come home for work. He also wants to host a come home year.
The summer of 2022 and the whole year of 2022, but certainly most come home years, most of the events are surrounding the summer schedule. I think that there are so many Newfoundlanders and Labradorians around the globe that are just anxious and ready to come home. And we need to welcome them with open arms, and we're going to promote that as such.
Meanwhile, PC leader Ches Crosby was in Deer Lake for a tourism announcement with the Humber Gross Mourne candidate Jim Gowdy today. His party wants to see more people make their way to the province. Crosby feels the current government isn't fighting hard enough for the high-end tourism dollar, citing the loss of numerous flights to this province.
The pandemic will eventually end, but that will not automatically mean a rebound for our tourism sector. We will lose out on those opportunities and the thousands of jobs that go with them unless we're much better prepared than before. Our Tourism Industry Association, Hospitality NL, has long been urging the province to do better. The PC government will join forces with them to immediately lay the groundwork for a job-creating rebound.
Now, NDP leader Alison Coffin didn't hold any media events today. She spent the day canvassing her district of Kitty-Vitty, St. John's East.
With 5 candidates in the running, Lake Melville is a district to watch. Michelle Bakey is running for the Liberals, Shannon Tobin for the PCs, and Amy Norman for the NDP. Perry Trimper used to be a Liberal, but now he's running as an independent. Here's what the candidates believe are the biggest issues in their area.
Housing and homelessness, and also around access to mental health support. And they're very related, so I bring them up together. So, you know, the cost of housing, the cost of rent here in Happy Valley Goose Bay, and all the other communities in the district is astronomically high.
First off is the roads. Route 510 has been long promised to have been fully paved. In fact, the Liberals back in 2019 actually said they were going to get it done, and they were going to be able to get it done right after the election. And we're in 2021 election, and it's still not done.
Well, some of the things I like to focus on are the long-term care facility and the access to the healthcare professionals. Like some of us, there are a large number of us in Lake Melville don't have access to family doctor. So that's a real big issue there.
The transportation for support for people trying to access medical care is probably a bigger issue. No, it is a bigger issue. Infrastructure, highways, communications.
There's a lot of things riding on this election, and I think it's important to not get too focused on, you know, what was said before.
I'm just getting a lot of support at the doors. People want to see change in this area.
Well, I'm moving forward. I don't want to look at the past, and then my way of starting with this campaign is looking ahead.
Unfortunately, also, I believe there's perhaps some political games. That all said, you know, I do not ever want to offend anyone.
Now, there is another independent candidate, Andrew Abbas. He declined CBC's request to take part. Well, a man from Hillview has been convicted on 2 counts of uttering threats to cause death and 5 weapons offenses. Harvey Merlin Price now faces serious jail time after a family dispute turned violent. It happened back in 2018 when Price fired shots at his former brother-in-law, Edison Avery, and Avery's partner. Now, you may recall the pair spoke with CBC about the incident at the time. Avery had been married to Harvey Price's sister. The couple divorced, and Avery later came out as gay and openly began dating a man. According to Avery, Price said he'd kill the pair if he ever returned to Hatchet Cove, where Avery has a cabin. The pair say Price showed up one day, hurled homophobic slurs, and fired at the couple. Avery tells CBC he and his partner are disappointed Price isn't also being charged with a hate crime. They also worry for their safety. Price is free on bail while awaiting sentencing.
Well, residents near Salmonier Nature Park should be on the lookout for a lynx. One recently escaped after a falling tree damaged its enclosure. Park staff and conservation officers are working to capture the animal. The Department of Fisheries, Forestry and Agriculture say people in the area shouldn't leave children or pets unattended outside. While it's not considered a threat to the public, wild animals can be unpredictable if approached. Residents should also secure litter or any food and garbage around their properties. If you or anyone spots the lynx, they're asked to call Salmonier Nature Park.
We're shining the spotlight on Natuashish tonight and looking at a new initiative launched in the community's school. Students are showcasing their artwork in a new calendar, one that school officials will print and distribute to staff and students. The teacher behind it hopes it'll encourage creativity and build self-confidence and provide a showcase for their artistic work. Take a look.
You did the calendar. It's your work. That's what we're showcasing. And ladies, gentlemen, thank you ever so much for taking the lead to show yourselves and the province our schools are capable of doing some fantastic things. I'll help students from a project like this will take away a sense of confidence, a sense of ability that they can do when they want to do. There's nothing they can't do. It's there, it's a natural given talent, but I don't think many students realize they have this talent. If they do have it, not many other people are recognizing it. And because it's not recognized, it goes to the wayside.
I made it from the pencils and crayons, and then I feel like something's good. And I like coloring so much. And sometimes I think I want to be a painter.
It's about two houses and mountains, and about geese, and about the land.
This is my classmates. This is Beatrice, Jonas, Georgie.
I like pencil drawing and watercolors. I do paintings once in a while, acrylic paintings. And it distracts me from other things, gets things off my mind.
That's a nice one.
I want to bring this up to the forefront. I want them to be aware of it, that we can do a lot of good work, a lot of great things, because we can. We just got to realize we can. So a sense of accomplishment, sense of confidence, sense of ability, which I think is lacking in our school system. We're not giving students sufficient credit for what they can do, and for what they have done, and for what they will do when they get the confidence.
Well, the blocking pattern that we've been in for the last little bit sticks around until at least the middle of next week when things start to change. I'll tell you what that means coming up.
We never had a grasp on the seriousness of the situation.
I went through really bad post-traumatic stress.
If someone steered, I'd say, would you like to ask me what happened?
We check back in with people who have faced some major life challenges.
It was transplant coordinator saying, we've got a kidney for you and you got to get to Halifax.
It gets frustrating at times, but like anything, everyone has challenges in life.
This is my story. Stay tuned for new episodes on Here and Now.
And this is my story.
This weather forecast is brought to you by Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism. Somewhere out there is a winter with your name on it. Find it now at stayhomeyear.ca.
Time for a look at the weather forecast with Ashley. It seems pretty quiet out there.
It has
Not
been.
much on the go.
I haven't had much to talk about, which is a good thing for the last
Little
couple
break.
of days. A little bit of a break. Yeah, it's nice for me too not to have to forecast some of those storms. But let's take a look at the temperatures right now. A pretty nice evening out there. -3 for St. John's and similar temperatures right across the board. They really haven't moved too much. That's not the story though. As we head through the overnight tonight, we are going to see those temperatures dip, and then right now sitting at about -15 in Lab City. Factor in that wind chill, feeling more like -21 and feeling more like the minus single digits, mid-minus single digits for the rest of the island. Taking a look at the satellite and radar, like I said, not a whole lot happening out there. We do have some flurries that are making their way from west to east across the province or across the island tonight, and the models are actually picking up on that quite well. So that will generally continue to head east as we head through the overnight tonight. Could bring a couple of centimeters with it, but overall not a whole lot happening. We're going to see some flurry activity up through, or light snow up through portions of coastal Labrador as well as central Labrador, and then quiet for Lab City as we head through the overnight. You can see as we head to the early morning hours, some of that snow will make its way towards the Avalon. So you might have to dust off your car when you wake up in the morning. Temperatures tonight should be dipping into the minus single digits. Inland areas, you may see them dip into the minus double digits. Certainly for those low-lying areas, Grand Falls winds are going down to about -12 tonight, with winds generally out of the northwest, about 10 to 15 kilometers per hour. So not much to speak of. For Labrador, you're looking at flurries again tonight for the west coastal areas rather, with winds a little bit breezy, upwards of about 50 kilometers per hour, and then a cold night again for Lab City, down to -19. Heading through the day tomorrow, that area of low pressure is still offshore, but it's going to move a little bit closer, and it's going to bring that potential for some scattered flurries across the board, essentially a carbon copy of what we saw today. A few peaks of sun. The best chance of seeing that sun will be through central and maybe just eastern areas, as the potential for some flurries will move through, and it looks like clearing skies as we head through the overnight. Again, that potential for some flurries along the west coast. But again, not a whole lot to talk about as far as that weather goes through the day tomorrow. So we're looking at highs anywhere from -3 to about -6. And winds will be out of the northwest, about 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. So a nice day. Again, the best chance of seeing that sunshine will be through central and the Burin Peninsula, as well as the south coast as we head through tomorrow. And then hovering in and or just below zero for the southeastern portion of Labrador. Cooler as you head west, a high near -15 for Lab City tomorrow and -11 for Nain, with flurries through the day. As we head through Friday, not a whole lot different. We're still looking at the potential for a few flurries as well as some peaks of sun into the afternoon. -2 for St. John's, -3 for Gander. Port aux Basques, you're looking at temperature near -2 for Friday. Start off the weekend fairly quiet, -6 along the Strait, -10 for Happy Valley Goose Bay, and you're looking at about -17 for Lab City. Similar temperatures you head into Saturday. However, things will start to get a little bit more gray across the island as we see that area of low pressure that I've been talking about moves a little bit closer and weakens, but it'll probably bring some more cloud cover with it and the potential for flurries as well. Now, that blocking pattern, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, has been around and will continue to be around as we head through the week. Then we start to see a change in the weather, and that will bring in this bump in the jet stream, which allows a little bit more warmer air to move in. And from what I can see, the next system that rolls through, at least the next significant system, because we're not really seeing much, looks like it'll see a little bit of a snow to rain mixture. And again, that's because we're going to see a little bit of a change in that pattern that we've been seeing for the past little bit. So Temperatures aren't that bad right now, but we will see a little bit of a bump in the temperatures as we head through midweek next week. But until we get there, we're just looking at scattered flurries through the weekend. Sunday, 0 degrees, Monday, -1, and your temperature moving maybe a degree or 2 after that, with the potential for flurries right through Monday. And then for central Newfoundland, similar temperatures. However, we will start to see a little bit of a drop in those temperatures back down to the minus double digits as we head into Monday evening. And then western Newfoundland above 0 by Sunday, maybe a degree or 2, but still flurries on tap. And then we're looking at Monday, some sunshine possible, but also a return of the potential for some flurries and -1. For eastern Labrador, your temperatures will climb up again for the weekend. By the end of the weekend, back down to about -8, -9 by Monday. But look at your temperature overnight, so back down to the -20s with sunshine for Monday. Quiet for Lab West. Pretty nice, maybe some flurries on Saturday, but overall, we're looking at plenty of sunshine and temperatures in the -teens. I wanted to share this beautiful sunset photo. Barry shared that one with us of Eddy's Cove West overlooking Port au Choix there. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if you have any weather photos to share with us, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
This province faces many challenges. A big one is demographics. The population is aging. More people are dying in this province than are being born. That's one of the reasons why a group called Faces of Fertility believes fertility services in this province should be an election issue. Right now, this province is one of only 2 in the country that does not offer in vitro fertilization procedures, or IVF. And my next guest, Lidan Wellen, wants to change that. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Ms. Wellen, you started the group Faces of Fertility. Why do you believe it's so important that IVF services be offered in this province?
A lot of the people in Newfoundland who need it have to travel, which almost doubles the price. And there's so many people. It's, I think, 1 in 6 Canadians, Canadian couples have trouble with having a child, and 1 in 6 couples in Newfoundland don't have access to the treatment that they need. And I think it was really important that people knew that, because I didn't know it until I needed it.
And can you give us a better idea of, what kind of toll does it take financially and emotionally on people who have to travel out of the province to access IVF?
Infertility is such a roller coaster of emotions anyway. It's really hard going through it because it's something that society tells you you're not supposed to talk about. And then having to pick up your life, take a full 3 weeks off, travel across the country to a clinic that you're not familiar with, that you don't know or trust the people yet, and then be away from your home while you're pumping yourself full of hormones, you're on all kinds of medications, you don't feel comfortable, you're having a surgery, and you have to do that all from a hotel room when it should be offered here so you could do it while you're at home.
Now, some people may argue that this is kind of a niche issue, that it only affects, a small portion of the population. So why should the general public support the idea of offering IVF in this province?
Because it's not an issue for you until it is. So you don't know if you're the next one to need it. You don't know if your child is the next one to need it. And then what happens when they don't have an extra $30,000 and they can't have the children that they so desperately want, when other people just decide when to have them? It's nothing I ever thought about until I was thrown into it. So it's not just an issue for the people dealing with it right now. It's an issue for so many people in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years that they don't know yet. So without being told now that we don't have access to the treatment, it's really hard to fight while you're going through it. So it should be an issue for everybody because you don't know who's next.
So what message do you want to send to the politicians that are out on the campaign trail right now?
I want them to know that it's not a topic that's going to be brought up at the door. You're not going to hear it from every person who needs it because it's such a private and personal issue. And while you're going through it, it's really hard to talk about it. So I just want them to know that there's so many people who who so desperately need these services offered here. And without, you know, someone kind of blasting it open like I've been trying to do, you're not going to hear it from the people. So just because, you know, the people answering the doors aren't telling you that they need IVF and that they can't afford it, doesn't mean that it's not a real issue in our province.
Well, Adon Wellen, maybe the politicians are listening to you right now. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So once they graduated or once the immigrants come here, they lack that job opportunities as they were working before. The people, like the community.
What would it take to make this province be an attractive place for immigrants? Well, we put together a panel to talk about it. That's coming up next.
Earlier in the show, we highlighted the lack of fertility services in this province and spoke with an advocate who argues the next government should make IVF procedures available in this province. The population, workforce, and tax base is shrinking in Newfoundland and Labrador. That's one argument for IVF. It's also a reason to promote immigration. I'm joined now by Avi Chima, a Toronto immigration lawyer who grew up in St. John's, Amr Alaguza, a project manager with the Association for New Canadians, and Cassia Sebastian, who immigrated to this province in 2019. She started a YouTube channel called Newfoundland Diary, where she answers questions from people looking to immigrate to Atlantic Canada. So Cassia, let's start with you. What do you think are some of the barriers facing people who are considering a move to this province?
Yeah, the main barrier I would say is the lack of job opportunities, which means when people immigrate, they are like qualified people with good experience and skills, or it would be like international students that are coming for graduation. So once they graduated or once the immigrants come here, they lack that job opportunities as they were working before. So that is the main concern most of the immigrants here and the potential immigrants as always.
Amr, let's go to you next. What are the biggest hurdles you see?
Okay, so when I think about it, plenty of the economic immigrants, when they think of immigrating to other countries or other locations, they think of mainly plenty of reasons and factors. Just to name a few, I'd say taxes. They do some sort of a comparative analysis between different locations and different provinces in terms of taxes and their ranking. And for example, business investors or business immigrants would be interested in locations that do provide some sort of a tax relief or a tax exemption for them to start up their business. That would be one thing. The other point would be, and surprise, surprise, inbound and outbound flights to and from other countries, something that many immigrants would think prior to taking that decision, and something that Newfoundland and Labrador does have some room for improvement in.
Absolutely, and we're actually starting to see that shrink right now during these COVID-19 times.
Correct.
Avi, you're an immigration lawyer. You also grew up in this province as the daughter of immigrants. What's your take on this?
So personally, I think that, we need to look at it from more of a long-term retention strategy. So right now, even though there are resources that exist for immigrants in the province, it's still fairly lacking in diversity. And I think that unless we implement things in school curriculums, in the healthcare system, in universities that allow for more anti-racism, anti-oppression training to create a welcoming environment where people feel like they can culturally exist in Newfoundland. That is, I think, one of the very first things that needs to happen. And also to perpetuate the idea that, it's not entirely the onus shouldn't be on immigrants to integrate into the community. Of course, that is something that's important. But I think the onus also needs to be on Newfoundland, its institutions, and its government to make sure that they are feeling welcome and that they feel that they would like to remain and build a community for themselves in the province.
What about this idea of a come from away mentality?
So, I guess initially, come from away meant to kind of define mainlanders at some point. But I think that, I think Newfoundland is very proud of its unique identity. And I am proud of Newfoundland's unique identity. But I think the issue comes when we define a Newfoundlander like a certain type of way, right? We look at someone who is honestly usually white, who can be defined as a Newfoundlander. And I think that Newfoundland and people who live there, including people who have, moved there and haven't lived there for generations, I think that we need to kind of expand that definition and understand that Newfoundland can retain its own sort of unique culture while still exploring and welcoming other cultures as well. So, I think this idea of immigrants and refugees coming to the province and kind of detracting from its own cultural identity is just not true. And the more we work towards this idea of living in a more diverse society, the more welcome immigrants are going to feel in the province.
Okay, so Kessia, let's go back to you. You know, there's an election underway. What are some of the ideas that you would suggest to the next government for ways to increase immigration to this province?
Yeah, as I said, the main factor that immigrants are looking forward is to get more job opportunities here. So basically, I would say maybe government could promote more startups or entrepreneurs and young generations to stay here. So once these startups comes in effect, maybe government should give maybe zero tax rebates for at least for the initial 3 to 5 years, so that these companies can well establish here and give more job opportunities here. So basically, this will lead international graduates and new immigrants to stick on to this province. And the people, like the community here, is so welcoming. For in my experience, I felt to be in home. Like people are so welcoming here. We can easily settle here if you have a good job.
Amar, let's go back to you. What would be some suggestions that you would make to the next government about how to promote immigration and to help immigrants as they move to this province?
So, Carolyn, when I thought about it, there are two pressing points or two pressing proposals that can be done by the next government. First one is to reinforce the concept of immigration think tank, something not so different from the initiative that is currently taking place in partnership with Newfoundland Workforce Innovation Center. It just needs to include as many members of the stakeholders as possible. So I'm talking members of different departments of the government, different regulating bodies, House of Assembly, different boards like Board of Trades, obviously MUN and CNA, employers, and last but not least, immigrants from different immigration streams. So they can all sit together, analyze the situation, come up with proposed solutions, and after drawing some conclusions, and then re-engineer the way forward. When they do that, they can then come up with obviously something that can be done henceforward. That would be one point. The other point would be a collaborative effort between different ministries or departments, such as the Department of Immigration, Skills and Labor, Department of Industry, Energy and Technology, and the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts and Recreation. They can sit together and come up with an ad campaign that can be addressed to other countries, or to be more specific, countries that export new immigrants, to let them know of the opportunities that they have here in Newfoundland and Labrador. This can be done after capitalizing on the technology boost that is taking place here in the province, that just started recently as well after the acquisition of Verifin by NASDAQ, so that we can promote Newfoundland as a technology hub for technology entrepreneurs and tech companies. Something similar to that already took place in Dublin, Ireland, when they created their Silicon Docks, and it proved itself very much a motive or a driver in the economic growth of that region.
Well, some great suggestions there and some wonderful insights. Amar Alagusa, Kessia Sebastian, and Avi Cheeman, thank you so much for making the time to speak with me about this.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carolyn.
Welcome back to Here and Now. Talks are underway to address anti-Indigenous racism in the healthcare system. Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller and other federal, provincial and territorial officials are conducting virtual sessions with healthcare experts and Indigenous leaders. These are follow-ups to meetings that were held in the aftermath of the death of Joyce Echaquan. The 37-year-old Indigenous woman used her phone to record her final moments in a Quebec hospital back in September.
We know going into the meeting that there is racism in the healthcare system. There's systemic racism in the healthcare system in every province and in every territory. We know that it is false to say that the federal government has no role to play in the health of Canadians. If anything, this epidemic has shown us as much. We also know that this is a jurisdiction that is jealously guarded by provinces.
A Manitoba man found an elder waiting outside a homeless shelter in minus 32-degree weather. Now he's using social media to make sure it doesn't happen again. Officials say the pandemic and staffing have made it difficult to keep the shelter in the Paw open 24 hours a day. The man who found the senior is calling for volunteers to help change that. Peggy Lamb has the story.
In town of the Paw.
On Sunday night, Alexander McKay was driving past the Oscars Place homeless shelter, and this is what he saw.
I came here, and then I see an elder laying on the snow here, approximately around 5 o'clock. And I pulled in, and I was trying to get him up to he's on a wheelchair, and I was trying to put him on there, and he was so cold. And I tried to call the ambulance. He refuses the ambulance.
The senior was waiting for the shelter to open. So McKay went home to get his ice fishing tent, a chair, a blanket, and some propane heaters. He then came back to the shelter to set it up for the senior. And together, they waited until it opened. McKay says the senior slept at the shelter that night, but the next morning, he was back in the tent. Manitoba Housing runs the shelter, and it says the shelter is typically not open in the daytime because they're short on staff. But as of today, more staff will be deployed to work there, and that's good news for McKay and his new friend.
So are you happy that you're going to be home now?
Yeah.
Yeah? Are you happy? Yeah. So I'm going to get rid of my tent. I'm going to take it home now. That was your home. And then we're going to take you inside the homeless center right now as we speak. So we need some volunteers here.
McKay is still rallying for volunteers in the Paw. He says he wants to make sure that the shelter stays open 24/7.
And I'm going to take my friend Alan to keep him warm in the shelter. Thank God, there's God out there. Okay, we'll see you guys, and God bless. We got the shelter open.
Peggy Lamb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, a recent study done for cosmetics giant Sephora found racial bias is a factor across the retail industry. An acknowledgement some Canadians say is long overdue. Jacqueline Hansen has more on the study and a Toronto woman who started her own makeup brand for people of color.
Tomi Belai Curtis is a model turned makeup creator.
When I would show up to shoots, I was expected to bring some of my makeup with me. The makeup artist wouldn't quite know what to do on my skin.
She founded Makeup for Melanin Girls 5 years ago, first as an online community to talk about which products would work, then as her own brand of eyeshadows, lip products, and more that pop on darker skin tones.
When I first started my business, the feedback I would get in general was that there's no problem. Like, Black customers aren't treated differently. Black customers don't need a separate product.
But a new study commissioned by beauty giant Sephora shows racial bias in retail persists. It surveyed shoppers across the U.S. retail industry and found nearly 4 in 5 felt there was a lack of brands owned by or made for people of color. 3 in 5 had experienced discriminatory treatment. 2 in 5 said it was based on the color of their skin. Shoppers who were Black, Indigenous, and other people of color reported being watched or followed, and reported dressing nicely or leaving bags at home to avoid being mistreated or accused of theft.
There's a belief that racialized customers are poor, that racialized customers are thieves, and that consumer racial profiling actually works.
Those myths and biases exist in Canada as well. To combat them, the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission helped develop a free online course for retailers and their employees.
There is a significant amount of work left to be done on consumer racial profiling. And because racism is still rampant in our society, we will find it in our retail stores.
Sephora Canada says the recent U.S. survey findings will further inform changes here coming this spring.
It's an opportunity for us to take that research and really start to see what things are transferable to the Canadian marketplace.
9 teams are looking into areas for change, from employee training to diversity in hiring and brands. For Belai Curtis, seeing change in her industry is encouraging, but also surprising after her ideas for inclusive products had been ignored by many.
It's kind of surreal now to see so much attention being brought to diversity and inclusion in beauty.
She hopes it's not superficial. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
There are new details on the accusations against former Governor General Julie Payette, who resigned last week. The details come from an independent review into claims of harassment at Rideau Hall. The CBC has been told by sources that Payette's behavior went beyond verbal harassment. Those who took part in an independent probe say the former Governor General's harassment crossed over into instances of physical contact. Several sources with direct knowledge say Payette's workplace behavior went beyond screaming at, belittling, and publicly humiliating employees. It included unwelcome physical contact that caused some to feel threatened. Roughly 100 public servants volunteered to be interviewed. CBC has not yet seen a copy of the final report.
on your street.
Calling all kids. We're looking to share your stories for our new segment, On Your Street. Interview your pet, show us how to make your favorite snack, or give us a tour of your favorite place. The options are endless. For all the details and to submit your video, head to cbc.ca/nl and click on the Community tab. All right, Ashley, quick recap of the weather, even though not a whole lot's going on.
No, but we're still going to see the potential for some flurries. So when you wake up in the morning, you might have to dust off your car. Let's take a look at the future tracker just to show that already picking up on some of that snow along the west coast. That will work its way across the island as we head into the early morning hours with some clearing skies. Might see some sunshine to start the day through central. And then as we head through tomorrow afternoon, again, some lingering flurry activity possible, some peaks of sun through central as well as eastern areas. And then coastal Labrador, you're looking at the potential for flurries right through the day. Temperatures tomorrow not too bad, sitting around -3 to -5 across the island. Winds generally out of the west or northwest, somewhere between 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. Those mild temperatures continue for coastal areas of Labrador. Cartwright only seeing a high near -2 tomorrow, or should I say seeing a high near -2 tomorrow. Minus double digits the story for Nain, about -11 and -15 in Lab City. And again, some periods of sun, some periods of cloud, and also the potential for some flurries.
Looks pretty nice, actually.
It does.
It's nice to actually be able to have decent weather to be able to enjoy the snow. You know, now that we've got a layer over much of the province, you know, it's hasn't rained and turned it all to slush and ice. So that's
And I'm sure I'm sure all the candidates out on the campaign trail appreciate the lack of stormy weather as well. And Peter, we should note that 1 week from today, we're going to be having the debate, the leaders' debate.
Yep, leaders' debate. It's going to be on television starting at 7 o'clock 1 week from tonight, and we'll have lots of information about how to submit some questions, and we're starting to put that all together now. So yeah, you'll hear a whole lot more about it in the coming days.
All right, that's it for us, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Have a good night.
Good night.